The Galactic Council chamber hummed with hushed voices as representatives from hundreds of species gathered to discuss the escalating tensions with humanity. The air was thick with uncertainty, the domed ceiling casting a dim, neutral glow over the long, crescent-shaped table where the most powerful figures in the galaxy sat. At the center of it all was High Commander Velrath of the Dominion, his dark chitinous armor gleaming under the artificial lights. His compound eyes locked onto the human ambassador seated across from him, his mandibles twitching with impatience. The humans had been expanding at an alarming rate, their technological advancements outpacing projections. Worse, their military had never been formally tested in a galactic-scale war. The Dominion, rulers of half the known galaxy, had assumed the humans would be easy to intimidate, that their diplomacy would be laced with fear. But now, as Velrath studied the human envoy, he felt the first stirring of unease. Ambassador Daniel Hayes sat in an infuriatingly casual manner, leaning back in his chair, one hand resting lazily on the armrest while the other idly tapped at a small data pad. His expression was calm, composed. And then there it was, that small, unsettling curve of his lips. A smile. Velrath had studied human body language, but something about the way this one smiled made his instincts prickle. It was not a gesture of warmth, nor submission. It was something else entirely. "You do not seem concerned, Ambassador Hayes," Velrath finally spoke, his voice a controlled hiss. "Perhaps you fail to grasp the gravity of this situation." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to the human. Hayes exhaled through his nose, tilting his head slightly. "Oh, I understand just fine," he replied smoothly. "But I don't think you do, Commander." The way he said it, light, almost amused, sent a ripple of discomfort through the alien delegates. Velrath's mandibles clicked together sharply. "You humans have pushed too far. The Dominion does not tolerate unchecked expansion. You will either submit to oversight or face consequences beyond your comprehension." A few murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. It was a fair warning, the kind that had made lesser species kneel before the Dominion's might. But Hayes simply chuckled. And then slowly, he leaned forward, his smile widening ever so slightly, exposing more of his teeth. A flicker of movement swept through the gathered alien leaders. Instinctual reactions, deep-rooted responses from countless generations of evolution. To most species in the galaxy, the baring of teeth was an act of aggression, a predatory display. Even those who had studied human behavior found themselves shifting uncomfortably. Velrath stiffened. "You find this amusing?" he snapped. Hayes drummed his fingers on the table. "Not amusing, Commander," he said, eyes gleaming. "Just ironic." His voice was smooth, measured, but there was something else there, something ancient and dangerous coiled beneath the surface. "You see, you believe you're issuing a warning, but you haven't realized something crucial." Velrath leaned in slightly, his patience thinning. "And what is that?" The smile never faltered. "You're talking to a species that grins when it's about to go to war." The chamber fell into a thick, suffocating silence. Velrath's second-in-command, a seasoned strategist who had conquered entire star systems, shifted uncomfortably. The humans were an anomaly among sentient beings. They did not bare their teeth in submission, nor in mindless aggression. No, humans smiled before violence. They smiled when hunting. They smiled when cornered, when they knew something their enemies didn't. It was a sign, a warning that their next move was already decided. Velrath's grip on the table tightened. "Do not mistake confidence for strength, human," he growled. Hayes simply shrugged, pushing back his chair and standing with an air of ease. "Oh, I don't," he said lightly. "But you did. And that's why this meeting is over." He turned without another word, walking toward the exit with the same infuriating calm. Velrath could only watch as the doors slid shut behind him, the echo of his footsteps lingering in the chamber like the distant thunder before a storm.
The War Council of the Dominion stood in tense silence, their elongated figures casting sharp shadows against the dimly lit war room. Holographic displays flickered above the circular table, showing the latest intelligence reports, fleet movements, and intercepted human communications. High Commandant loomed over the center display, his clawed hands pressed firmly against the surface as he studied the tactical readouts. Despite the overwhelming strength of the Dominion's armada, a gnawing unease had settled in the room. The humans had not responded to their ultimatum. No desperate pleas for negotiation, no frantic attempts at diplomacy. Instead, they had simply waited. The silence from their side of the conflict was unsettling. It was not the behavior of a species that feared war. It was something else entirely. General, a veteran of countless Dominion campaigns, let out a low, clicking growl. They should have responded by now, either with compliance or bluster. But this quiet, it is unnatural. Said nothing, his gaze locked on a specific report. A recon probe sent near the human Beordan had failed to return. Another had been reduced to static upon transmission. Strange energy fluctuations had been detected along human trade routes, anomalies that the Dominion scientists could not explain. They are planning something, muttered, more to himself than to his council. Something we are not prepared for. The words left a bitter taste in his mandibles. It was absurd. There was nothing the humans could do that would surprise the Dominion. Their fleet was smaller. Their technology, while advanced, had not yet been tested against the full might of the Empire. And yet, every instinct in body screamed at him that something was terribly wrong. A communication officer interrupted the grim silence. "High Commandant, we have intercepted a human transmission. It was sent on all open frequencies within our Beordans." The room tensed. "Play it," commanded. The holographic display shimmered before shifting into a simple, chilling image. A human soldier, clad in dark combat gear, standing in an unidentifiable war zone. He was unarmed. And he was smiling. The image remained frozen for a moment before the transmission played. A single sentence, spoken in flawless Dominion language. "We see you." The war room erupted into furious murmurs, officers exchanging uneasy glances. The message was not a threat. It was not a warning. It was simply knowledge. A statement of fact. A revelation that whatever humanity was doing, they were watching. They were aware. General mandibles twitched in agitation. "This is psychological warfare," he spat. "They wish to unsetter us. We should not allow primitive theatrics to cloud our judgment." Did not answer immediately. He replayed the image in his mind, the soldier's expression, the subtle tilt of his head, the almost playful smirk. It was too calculated, too intentional. This was not bravado. This was certainty. The humans did not need to posture. They knew something the Dominion did not, and that made them dangerous. "Send a scout fleet," he ordered at last, his voice controlled but firm. "I want our forces on high alert. If they wish to play mind games, we will remind them why the Dominion rules this galaxy." Hours later, a small fleet of Dominion warships slipped into space, their cloaking systems rendering them nearly undetectable. They would scout the Beordan, gather intelligence, determine what the humans were preparing. They were the best, trained to operate unseen, to extract data without leaving a trace. They did not return. No distress signals. No wreckage. No traces of combat. Just gone. The Dominion War Council stared at the blank reports in stunned silence. "Impossible," General whispered. "They were ghosts. There is no way the humans could have detected them." But knew better. Another transmission arrived. This time, it was not an image. It was a live feed. A single Dominion officer from the missing fleet appeared on the screen, bound but unharmed. His breathing was steady, his compound eyes darting left and right. Then, from the shadows behind him, a human figure stepped forward. This man was not a soldier. He wore no armor, no visible weapons. Just a crisp military uniform and that same infuriating smile. "Hello, Commandant," the human said, addressing the room as if he were standing among them. "I think you've misunderstood something." His voice was calm, even amused. Clenched his jaw. "You there?" But the human cut him off with a slow shake of his head. "You're the predators in this galaxy, right? You think you understand war, understand fear." He leaned forward, his smile widening ever so slightly. "But you made a mistake. You thought we smile because we're friendly." The Dominion War Council held its breath as the human continued, was smooth as polished steel. "But we don't smile out of kindness." The screen flickered. The Dominion officer in the feed shuddered. And then, As if the universe itself had played a cruel joke, the human bared his teeth in full, grinning like a predator about to pounce. We smile because we already know how this ends. The transmission cut out. Hands curled into fists. For the first time in his career, he felt it, fear.
The Dominion warship Vector hung in the void, its vast form bristling with weapon emplacements and reinforced armor plating. It was the pride of the Dominion's Third Fleet, an indomitable force meant to crush any defiance in the galaxy. And yet, within its command deck, silence reigned. High Commander Velrath stood rigid, his mandibles twitching in a slow, erratic pattern, an involuntary response to unease. Before him, holographic displays shimmered with unsettling reports. The scouting fleets had vanished. Entire squadrons had been lost with no trace, no warning, and no sign of battle. And now, Vector had received a priority transmission from another Dominion warship, the Trelkshan, one of their most advanced reconnaissance vessels. Velrath motioned for the transmission to be played. The screen flickered, revealing the interior of Trelkshan's bridge, but something was wrong. The usual dim blue lighting was replaced by the erratic red glow of emergency systems. The crew was slumped over their consoles, unmoving. The camera trembled, as if handled by someone who had forgotten how to keep their grip steady. A deep, ragged breath filled the transmission's audio feed. Then came the voice, Captain Cyril, a hardened veteran of the Dominion, his tone raw and broken. High Commander. He barely managed the words, his mandibles clicking nervously. We engaged a human ship. A single human vessel. Velrath's claws curled. A single human ship? No human warship could match a Dominion scout fleet in firepower or speed. This had to be a mistake. Explain, he ordered, his voice colder than the void. The screen flickered again. The camera rotated, revealing the outside of the Trelkshan through its viewport. And there it was, a lone human warship, unassuming in design, barely the size of a Dominion corvette. It floated motionless in the abyss, as if indifferent to the devastation around it. Cyril's voice dropped to a whisper. It did not fire upon us. It did not pursue us. We fired first. Velrath's mandibles twitched. Standard protocol dictated immediate engagement when encountering a lesser species warship. But something in Cyril's tone sent a chill through Velrath's core. We unleashed everything, Cyril continued. Torpedoes. Plasma bombardments. We severed its engines. We struck its hull with atomics. It should have been reduced to dust. His breathing hitched, and the screen glitched momentarily. When it resumed, Cyril was closer now, his compound eyes darting toward the edges of the screen. But it was still there, he whispered. It just smiled at us. Velrath's claws dug into the command console. Explain yourself, Captain. The camera flickered, showing grainy, distorted footage from Trelkshan's external cameras. The human ship was illuminated by the flickering light of Dominion weapon fire. Yet despite the damage, it remained intact. And through the viewport, standing on the bridge of that human vessel, was a figure. The human was visible even from this distance. His posture was relaxed, his stance unarmed. And yet, the most terrifying detail was not the resilience of his ship. It was his expression. A slow, deliberate smile stretched across his face. Not one of arrogance. Not one of fear. But something more primal. A knowing smile. A predator's grin. The footage shook violently as alarms blared. Static overtook the screen, and Cyril's voice became frantic. It's inside. I don't know how. The doors were sealed, the bulkheads reinforced, but a loud crash cut him off. The sound of steel bending. The Dominion crew on the Vector froze as they listened to something breathing, something that was not Cyril. A deep inhale. A long exhale. Then the camera was knocked aside, spinning wildly before landing at an angle. The last image it captured was a shadowed silhouette stepping onto the Trelkshan's bridge, its features obscured except for one thing. The glint of teeth in the dim emergency lighting. A chilling voice followed. You called us primitives. The screen went black. Velrath's blood ran cold. The Dominion officers on the Vector looked at one another, their postures rigid with barely concealed terror. Trelkshan was gone. Its crew had been experienced warriors, ruthless and efficient. And yet, they had been reduced to trembling whispers before the end. Velrath clenched his fists. This was not war as he knew it. It was something older, something more insidious. The humans were not fighting for survival. They were playing a game, one they had already won before the Dominion even realized they were playing. High Commander, one of his subordinates croaked. What are your orders? Velrath stared at the empty screen. Every instinct screamed at him to withdraw, to abandon this war before it truly began. But such cowardice was unacceptable. He straightened, forcing his voice to remain steady. We proceed as planned. No more reconnaissance. No more games. We bring the full force of the Dominion against them. The bridge crew hesitated but obeyed, relaying orders to the rest of the fleet. As the Vecthar and its accompanying warships moved deeper into human space, Velrath allowed himself one final glance at the blackened screen. The last image of that human smile lingered in his thoughts, a dreadful reminder that the humans had no need for threats. They had no need for boasts, because they had already made their message clear. They smiled before violence, and the Dominion had just given them every reason to grin.
The Dominion fleet was in full retreat, their once proud warships now fractured, limping wrecks scattered across the void. Fires still raged within the hulls of their largest battleships, oxygen leaking into space in ghostly trails. The once imposing dreadnoughts, symbols of their empire's power, had been reduced to silent tombs, drifting in the cold abyss. High Commander Velrath stood on the command deck of the Vecthar, gripping the railing so tightly that his claws left deep indentations in the metal. His mandibles trembled, his breathing shallow. The humans had done this. Not with overwhelming numbers, not with superior firepower, but with something far worse. They had let the Dominion think they had a chance. The battle had begun as a full-scale invasion, a show of force meant to crush humanity before they could become a true threat. Hundreds of Dominion warships had jumped into the Sol system, their weapons primed to eradicate anything in their path. They expected resistance, yes, but nothing they couldn't handle. Humans were Deathworlders, unpredictable, dangerous in close quarters, but surely no match for the Dominion's long-range tactical supremacy. The battle plan had been simple: strike fast, strike hard, overwhelm them before they could adapt. It should have worked. It always worked. But the humans, they had laughed. Velrath's mandibles clicked together as he replayed the opening moments of the battle in his mind. The first shots had been fired by the Dominion, a relentless bombardment of plasma lances and antimatter warheads designed to cripple Earth's defenses before the ground invasion began. And yet, in response, the humans had done something he had never seen in all his cycles of war. They had not scrambled in fear. They had not sent desperate pleas for mercy. Instead, they had broadcast a message across every open channel. A single phrase, spoken in their crude, guttural tongue, but one that needed no translation. "Is that all you've got?" What followed had been impossible. Ships that should have been torn apart had moved with an unnatural grace, dodging barrages that should have vaporized them. Human weapons, seemingly primitive in comparison, had bypassed Dominion shields as if they weren't even there. Their ships were smaller, their numbers fewer, yet they fought with a brutality that defied all logic. But the worst part, the part that sent a deep, primal fear into Velrath's core, was their demeanor. They smiled. Through every exchange of fire, every intercepted transmission, the human pilots had laughed, their grins wide and unshaken. Even as Dominion warships exploded around them, even as their own ships took damage, they exuded something Velrath had never encountered before: enjoyment. The Dominion warriors were seasoned veterans. They had conquered hundreds of worlds, eradicated entire civilizations without breaking formation. And yet, in that battle, they had been reduced to prey. The humans didn't fight to survive. They fought because they loved it. They took hits that should have sent them running and came back with twice the ferocity. Their ships weren't just weapons. They were predators, lurking in the darkness of space, waiting for Dominion vessels to make a mistake before pouncing with terrifying efficiency. It had been a massacre. The Dominion forces had gone from an overwhelming fleet to a scattering of broken survivors in less than an hour. Velrath had given the order to retreat, not because he feared defeat, but because he feared something far worse. The humans had let them run. No pursuit. No final blow. Just silence. The only thing they left behind was a single, chilling transmission. The image of a human soldier, bloodied but grinning, teeth bared in a way that sent a visceral shudder through Velrath's body. The message was simple: "Come back any time. We'll be waiting." Now, standing among the wreckage of his fleet, Velrath felt something he had never known before. True, unshakable terror. The Dominion had encountered countless warrior species, had fought and crushed civilizations that prided themselves on strength. But the humans were different. They did not fight for territory or survival alone. They fought because it was in their nature. And worse, they enjoyed it. The grins, the laughter, the reckless, unrelenting fury with which they tore through his fleet. It was not madness. It was confidence. Arrogance, even. As if war was nothing more than a sport to them. A low, rattling breath escaped Velratha's throat. The Dominion could never return. Not to Sol, not to human space. The Empire was vast, powerful beyond measure, but for the first time, he saw its limits. The humans had no limits. They had fought without fear, without hesitation, as if they had been waiting for a challenge like this for centuries. And now, they would only grow stronger. Velrath knew what would come next. The humans would not chase them. They wouldn't need to. The Dominion would never recover from this loss, not fully. His subordinates stood around him in silent horror, waiting for an order, for some command that would bring clarity to the nightmare they had just survived. But Velrath had none to give. He turned to his communications officer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Send a message to the High Council." His mandibles clicked as he swallowed the last remnants of his pride. "Tell them, we must never engage the humans again." There was no argument, no protest, only solemn nods and the quiet acceptance of a truth they had all witnessed firsthand. As the battered remains of the Dominion fleet limped into the depths of space, leaving behind the battlefield that had once been their greatest ambition, Velrath allowed himself one final glance at the empty void behind them. He could still see it in his mind. The humans' smile. The last thing any of them had seen before their entire fleet had been torn apart. And the unspoken message beneath it. "Next time, we won't let you run."